In my last video about Witcher 4, I covered all the news we have so far on the game. Naturally, the question of who will serve as the protagonist, a matter that is very much unclear at this time, prompted quite a bit of debate down in the comments section. But we have a long way to go until we get an answer, and even longer until Witcher 4 actually comes out. So while we wait, I think it'd be a good idea to continue discussion by speculating about who the protagonist might be and taking a close look at each possible candidate. Over the next few months, I'll be putting out videos weighing the pros and cons of bringing back Geralt, rolling with someone like Letho or Eskel, taking a trip back in time to explore Vesemir's past, or even allowing players to create a custom Witcher character. But first, we're going to examine the possibility of CD Projekt Red handing the reins over to Ciri, which I find to be one of the most likely possibilities. But before I dive into all that, if you are a Witcher fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with the YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. When it comes to Ciri, I see plenty of great reasons to make her the protagonist of Witcher 4, the first being that her taking over the lead role is very much the natural progression of things. There are narrative issues that I'll touch on later, but thematically, it makes a lot of sense. In both the Witcher novels and the third game, Geralt is indeed the protagonist, but the story centers around Ciri. She's basically a human MacGuffin. She's what keeps the plot in motion, the person everyone's after, whether that's because of her elder blood, her status as the heir to Nilfgaard, or simply to keep her safe, as is the case with Geralt. But now that she's an adult, simply protecting her isn't enough. She needs to have the freedom to make her own choices, to become her own person, while Geralt and Yennefer need to trust that the lessons they've taught her over the years will hold true. All of the choices Geralt makes in the final act of the game are about this very thing, about learning to be a father to a daughter who's come of age, who no longer needs guidance or training, but support and encouragement. And now that she has indeed become her own person, the next logical step is for her to go out into the world and prove it. To show the continent who she is without Emir and Eredin after her, without Geralt and Yennefer around to bail her out if things get tough. The idea of Ciri out on her own, stuck battling a powerful and dangerous monster like a higher vampire, a greater dragon, or even Gauntro Dim, with only the lessons of her foster parents to rely on, could really lead to a compelling narrative. All of this could be set up quite neatly by canonizing the good ending of Witcher 3, where Ciri becomes a Witcher. There would be some narrative hurdles, like what to do about her Witcher mutations, and how much to limit her magical potential. But I can't imagine that they would be all that difficult to clear. In following up on this ending, Witcher 4 would essentially be a true sequel to Witcher 3, picking up right where the game left off, and in doing so, foster continued interest in the all-time classic from 2015. Circling back to her magical potential, there is so much they could do with her incredible powers. They could allow her to go full tilt, basically turning her into a Witcher mage hybrid, or rein her in a bit by sprinkling some of the abilities we've already seen from her with Witcher signs. And on the note of Witcher signs, remember, they're just a more basic form of magic. They're spells that can be cast by any mage. But in the hands of a more potent or experienced spellcaster, they are, of course, far more powerful. This is represented pretty well in the Witcher TRPG. If an average Witcher casts Igni on you, it's gonna hurt. But if a mage or Witcher spec for magic does it, then you better write your obituary and hand your buddies a bag, because they're gonna be picking up pieces of you all over the battlefield. Shout out to my buddy Stefano on that one. So not only could Ciri easily learn Witcher signs, but she'd probably be able to unlock all kinds of crazy, never-before-seen forms of them that would make gameplay incredibly fun. Another gameplay element that CD Projekt Red could shake up with Ciri as the protagonist would be the fast travel system. The Witcher 3 signpost fast travel system is a bit dated at this point, but with Ciri's magic, they'd have a narrative reason to create a more flexible method of traveling from place to place. And in light of her ability to teleport, they really could take this story all over the continent. It wouldn't have to center around adjacent nations, as we see in Witcher 3. Ciri could take us everywhere from Zerrikania to Ophir, or even the lands beyond the Dragon Mountains, all of which would really unshackle the developers from a writing perspective. Speaking of the story, there are a ton of different directions they could go with Ciri. No matter what she does in her life, people will always be after her because of her elder blood, which opens up room for any number of potential antagonists, either someone from the continent or a force from another realm entirely. With Ciri involved, the possibilities really are endless. But what about the School of the Lynx, which we know will factor into the game in some way? Well, perhaps the School of the Lynx is a new branch of Witchers that Ciri founded in the years since the previous game, along with a ragtag bunch of surviving Witchers from other schools. Or maybe they're a school she stumbled upon in a far-off land, like one of those aforementioned foreign nations, and has since found a home with. That would be a pretty convenient way to explain their sudden appearance in the lore. Or maybe they're a lost and forgotten school with a connection to the game's story. Just as I said earlier, with Ciri behind the wheel, there are so many potential paths they could take. But what about the cons? Well, as I said earlier, making Ciri the protagonist would require canonizing the good ending of Witcher 3. That presents a huge problem of its own, as it would invalidate the other two endings of the game. I don't think there's anyone out there who would have a problem with ignoring the bad ending, where a heartbroken Geralt seeks his own death in the swamps. But I don't think you can say the same about the middling ending, where Ciri becomes the Empress of Nilfgaard. I know some people who really swear by that ending, and honestly, I understand where they're coming from. It's bittersweet nature, with Geralt well aware that he raised a young woman who he's proud of, but is now burdened with the responsibility he never wanted for her, is exactly the type of storytelling The Witcher is known for. Canonizing the good ending while erasing the middling one would run counter to this, and upset a significant portion of the fanbase, which is not the best way to get people hyped for what will end up being the first true Witcher game in over a decade. Taking a look back at the gameplay, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of exciting things you could do with it given Ciri's vast magical power. But that in and of itself is a problem. Part of the appeal of The Witcher, for me, is the amount of planning and preparation that goes into each fight. I love the process of brewing up potions, crafting bombs, and preparing oils that perfectly counter the abilities of the monster I'm hunting. Ciri can easily learn all of these skills, but I'm just not certain that she'd need them in the first place. Ciri's extensive abilities could easily make the tactical, strategic elements of the combat a non-factor. Where Geralt would throw a bomb, she'd be more likely to fire off a spell that would do twice that much damage. Of course, this is something they could totally account for by amping up the threat level of the monsters she's faced with, which would flow nicely with the possibility of her being threatened by a force from another realm. But I do think it's the type of thing that CD Projekt Red will need to be cognizant of as they begin their work on this one. But the biggest downside I see, and you're probably going to hear this from me a couple times over the next few months, is that changing protagonists is hard work. It's a difficult move for any franchise to make. Even if it makes narrative sense, as I believe it does here, it's just not easy to do. There are some spectacular comic books where Dick Grayson takes over for the Dark Knight, but there's a reason that every Batman movie ever made has Bruce Wayne beneath the cowl and not his understudy. We've seen this in recent video games as well. God of War appears to be rolling with Kratos, even though Atreus, at one point, seemed to be waiting in the wings to take on the lead role. To some people, a Witcher game without Geralt won't be a Witcher game at all. And while I don't agree with that sentiment, I certainly do understand it. Overall, I think that Ciri is the most likely candidate to be the protagonist of Witcher 4. Witcher 3's good ending sets up for it pretty well, and it's a shift that the books and the games have been building toward all along. But there are plenty of other possibilities, so I hope you'll join me next time as we discuss the pros and cons of Geralt suiting up for one more adventure in Witcher 4. Thanks for watching. Huge shout out to my silver and gold tier channel members James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, and Corey Matson, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 a month. Big thanks to Ellen Storm, who's allowed me to use her covers from the Witcher 3 soundtrack for these videos. See you guys next time.